Hello and welcome to this Data Visualization Best Practices video. My name is Katherine and I'm a Data and Analytics Consultant at Thorogood based in São Paulo, Brazil. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about Thorogood and what we do, then give some context and explain the basic theory behind data visualization. And finally, in order to do so, it is really important to bring three elements together: analytics, technology, and focus on a business. We're a global company with offices in the UK, US, Brazil, India, and Asia. And we help our customers define and implement data and analytics projects with data strategies, data design, and deliver end-to-end solutions all the way from data sourcing, transformation, to visualization. Also, we offer more advanced analytics and services such as data as a service, user training and empowerment, maintenance, and support of applications. In terms of technology, we are independent and can offer services across a range of different technologies and platforms. We have partnership with a lot of the key players in the data and analytics space, such as Microsoft, Databricks, AWS, and Google Cloud Service. And this independence is important because it means we're able to advise and implement solutions leveraging technology that best fits the needs of our clients. Okay, so let's get started. The definition of data visualization can be as simple as the visual representation of data, meaning we can use a lot of visual elements, not just text and numbers, to communicate to someone, a reader or a user, what the data is showing. Data visualization has been around for a long time and it has different applications. The most common, I'd say, is in journalism, where we see charts, shapes, and images showing data everywhere, such as in magazines, TV, infographics, and on the web. Academia is another very important application, and it's where you see a lot of the more complex parts and visuals, which are intended to an audience that is going to do very detailed analysis when publishing a study on the paper and choosing visualizations to help present some findings. By the way, this is where the whole field of data science came from, because it started in academic environments. And last but not least, business intelligence, which is what we're going to focus on today. In BI, we use data visualization to keep track of the business in the form of report and dashboard. Every department in a data-driven organization has a lot of metrics and goals that needs to be monitored and interpreted every day so that people can make well-informed decisions. There are different levels of complexity in these metrics. They can have a lot of data sources, many comparisons can be made, and can have quite a few different groups of users, each with different needs. So overall, it's a very dynamic environment. For the two applications on the left, the visualizations are usually formatted to be presented only once in a static way. But in business intelligence, the numbers keep changing all the time. So we need to make sure that the charts behave well and have the accurate information for the users to analyze them. It is important to know that within a company, there are three basic types of analysis that a report or a dashboard can help us with. Depending on the goal of the analysis, visualization is used in different ways. For example, exploratory analysis is when you don't have your questions ready and you're going to play around with a visualization tool such as Tableau or Power BI to understand the data better and see if there is any pattern that can lead to an insight. Or you can do a descriptive analysis that can help you answer your day-to-day business questions or do some diagnose or describe something that's happening and that your data is telling you. Here's where you find the periodic reports, which can be daily, weekly, monthly, and also some isolated ad hoc reports. And finally, it is possible to use visualization tools to help explain something after the data is already analyzed and interpreted. This means you can use visualizations to help you tell a story, add comments, and prove a point. All of those three types of analysis together is what helps people to make better and informed decisions within a company. So what makes a good dashboard? What's the best way to tell if a dashboard is successful? If we're talking about BI inside an organization, the answer is simple: adoption. Your dashboard can be very pretty, very informative, but if no one's using it, or if people are always wanting to export the data back to Excel, then your dashboard hasn't served its purposes. So here I want to take a step back and talk not just about visualization, but about other things you need to have so people actually use your dashboards. First of all, they need to be reliable. Your numbers need to be right. Even if the underlying data is not your responsibility, if your numbers are wrong, people will say that your dashboard is wrong. So you need to really understand the data being used and the calculations that are being done. Your dashboard needs to have a good performance also, both in the data refresh, which can be done overnight in most cases, and during navigation. When the user opens the dashboard or clicks on a filter, it shouldn't take more than a few seconds to respond. And for that, you need to have a good solution architecture and a very good data model behind everything. The communication needs to be clear. And here is where a good use of visualizations come in. And we're going to get into more details in the next slides, but usability or user experience. This means things being well organized, a nice navigation flow between pages, interactions between charts, etc. And to achieve that, you need to understand each user. The same data set can generate different dashboards for different users. Executives, for example, need to see very high-level data, usually don't want to spend much time clicking around to get their answers, while analysts generally go into a lot of more detail. But overall, in order for a dashboard or report to be adopted, the information it gives needs to have business value. So you, as the report maker, always need to understand the business objectives. And if they change, the report needs to change as well. So how does it work? Well, first you need to think. Why do you use charts, diagrams, shapes, and colors? It's because our brains are much faster at processing visual information than just plain text. And all of the tips I'm gonna give here are based on that. When you create something, you have to think, how are people's brains gonna react to what I'm showing? So here's a little exercise. I invite you to pause this video right now and count how many number 5s there are on the screen. Is it 5 or 6? Were they easy to find? Now I'm gonna make a small change and you see if it makes it any easier. It does it, right? So what did I do here? I changed a couple of visual elements. In this case, the width of the font, making it bold, and the color. And that made your brain find the number much faster. Here are some of the visual elements that your brain will use to differentiate data points from each other. Length, width, orientation, size, shape, enclosure, or having something around the feel of the data points will help your brain to understand the data better. Also, the position, which is what you see in the axis of a line chart of a scatter plot, for example, grouping, and color, which you can break down further into things like hue, saturation, brightness, amount, or RGB, etc. So here's an example. By changing the font and the color of the text, I can guide your eyes to look at where I want you to look. So another example is a big sales KPI that you're gonna see every day. What's more important, the number or the title? The number, because the title, you're gonna memorize it eventually. So highlight the number. Another example, look at these 4 data sets. They all have the same mean and standard deviation of both X and Y. So if you look at them, it's really hard to tell how different they are. But when you put those data sets in plot, you can see that the data has a very different pattern in each of them. So this is just to highlight the importance of charts. Surprisingly, a lot of people still have trouble trusting charts and still insist on having a lot of tables in their reports. Maybe the reason is if that they've always have been given really poor charts, or it's just a cultural adaptation that needs to happen. In any case, if that's a problem in your organization, it's definitely something we can help you with. Alright, so let's apply these principles and get into some tips and best practices of data visualization. One important thing to understand is the function of axes and labels. They both exist to identify data and differentiate sizes. In this case, we're using bar charts. The point is, if they both serve the same purpose, you only need one of them. So in the chart on the right, we've made a few improvements. 1. We've removed the x-axis because we're keeping the labels instead. 2. We've simplified the labels by dividing them by 1,000,000 and putting a M next to them. This makes it clear since those dollars at the end don't matter that much when we're looking at data that's so aggregated. 3. We've removed the title of both axes. The x-axis, number of users, is already indicated in the title. And the y-axis, if you look at the values, they're obviously names of countries. If you work looking at a chart by country every day, you don't need to be reminded that those are countries. This saves you a lot of space in your screen. And remember, having enough white space is just as important as having information. So it helps your brain look at what really matters. Speaking of cleaning space off your screen, here's something else you can do. On the left here, we have the y-axis repeating the euro values in the scale 11 times. You have the currency symbol, a dot, 3 zeros, a comma, plus 2 zeros at the end for each value. In the chart on the right, we've changed the title to say that the values are in thousands of euros, stating that only once, and then making the numbers on the axis a lot simpler, just going from 0 to 10. This also saves a lot of space and make it easier to read. Here's one tip around the usage of color. We often find ourselves adding a lot of color to our visualizations, trying to make it look nicer, maybe not as blank. But if you think about the visual elements, in this bar chart at least, you can see that the product categories are already distinguished by position. You have one bar for each category. So why would you need to differentiate them again? By giving each of them a different color. If I see that, I go looking for a legend, thinking that each color means something different, but that's not the case. So here, sticking to just one color is a better idea. This example is to help us think about the right type of chart to use. We could talk about many different chart types here, but I'm gonna stick to just a few today because the general principle is the same. Think about how your brain is gonna tend to perceive the information. So in this line chart on the left, the tendency is to read it from left to right. This gives an idea of movement, as if the data categories were changing in this direction. But that's not the case, and that's why a bar chart is better. Keep the use of line charts for when there's a logical sequence in the data, like something changing over time. Another example about chart types is in data visualizations, there's something called the case against pie charts. Pie charts have been very common in the past, even those weird 3D ones, but now they're not used as much. There's nothing with them, but you have to use them very carefully. And here's why. If you look at this chart on the left, in order to see what's the category corresponding to each slide, you will need quite a lot of movement with your eyes. Green slice, legend, okay, consumer. Next one, corporate, and so on. Quite a zigzag. Also, which one is bigger, the green or the gray one? It's hard to tell. You'd have to look at the labels and then compare the numbers, and that's with only 4 slices. Imagine with 10 or 15. So making some more changes on the right side, we have the same data, but as a bar chart. It doesn't look as colorful, but it's a lot of easier to read. You can rank the bars by value. You can see the amounts using the labels. You can add an average line if you want. In this case, it's obviously 25% because it's 4 slices, but you can see that the top category accounts for between 30 and 40% of the sales. And your eyes don't have to move as much to make sense of the data. One last thing about color. Suppose you have these 2 charts on the same screen. Can you tell if the sales on the left belong just to Brazil or to the whole company? It's hard to say because your brain will see the color and make that association, thinking that these sales correspond to the country with that color, but that's not very clear here. So be careful not to use the same color in different places, unless they mean the same thing. Now a tip about positioning your visuals. At least in the Western Hemisphere, our brains tend to look at things following this order. You start on the top left corner and do a Z shape until you get to the bottom right corner. So when building a business dashboard, keep that in mind. You can place your most important, quickest to read, macro level visual on the top left, and your most detailed visual, a table for example, on the bottom right. If your users sees the first visual and it looks okay as expected, they can move to the following page. If not, they can look at the other ones and try to understand what's happening. And here's the most important tip, I think, which is to break down and prioritize. I'm gonna show a couple examples of this and then we're done. So here we have a line chart showing the variance between your actuals and your budget over 12 weeks. You have three metrics, that is, three numbers that your eye can see for each week. The actuals, the budget, and the variance, which is the difference or distance between them. And you have one attribute, which is the week or time. With those metrics and attributes, you can create charts to picture four things: the budget over time, the actuals over time, the variance over time in absolute terms, in this case euro, and the variance over time in percentage terms, meaning what's the percentage difference between actuals and budget at each month. By creating a chart like this one, which of these 4 points is being communicated? Well, technically all of them. You have one line for the budget, one line for the actual. You can see the trend in each one. You can kind of see the distance between them at each month, and you can also look at the y-axis to see how much that it is in euros, but none of that gives you a quick reading. It takes a bit of time to grasp what's going on, and in some data points, like between weeks 3 and 6, it becomes a bit confusing. So this is where you have to prioritize. What do you want to show? What do you want to communicate and highlight? So suppose you've done the exercise and figure what the most important thing to show to the user here is the variance between budget and actuals over time in percentage terms. Then you can modify that chart, and it would need some changes in the calculations behind it to display only the variance. You fix the targets in a straight reference line and only show the variance in percentage terms. It's much simpler to read. You can see the ups and downs very clearly, ranging from minus 40% to plus 40%. If you go back to the previous chart and try to see those ups and downs, you see that it is pretty hard to grasp that. But in this one, it's very easy. Here's our final example on the same tip of breaking down and prioritizing. This is called a stacked column chart. You have the sum of units sold over 6 months by brand. In other words, you have two metrics that you can see, the number of units sold and also the share of each brand inside each bar or each month. The attributes are then brand and month. So what you can try to do to show here, the total units sold over time represented by the size of each total bar, and you can see an upward trend. The number of units sold over time in each brand, you can figure that out by looking at the size of the slice in each bar and then looking at the y-axis to see how much that it is. The brand share over time by looking at how the proportion of each slice of the bars changes over time, and the total brand share, which is kind of an average of the biggest slice in each month. Anyway, so this is a very rich chart. There's a lot of information you can get from it, but again, none of this information is very clear. It takes time to interpret it. So now that we've broke down what we can communicate, let's prioritize something and simplify. And I'm gonna do that in two alternative scenarios. The first scenario, suppose we've done an exercise with the users and realized that we need to highlight the total units sold over time and the brand share over time. So for total units, we're using a simple column chart, and for the share over time, we created a colored table or a heat map. It's a table with the percentage values of each brand, totally 100% in each column, which uses color to distinguish the smaller and the larger shares. With that, you can easily see the brand C has the most dominant share overall. You can see that the brand D has a dip in months 2 and 3 that can be analyzed further, and a few other isolated highlights. The second scenario, coming from that same stack column chart, this is another way to present the data after prioritizing what to display. Here we choose to show the trend of units sold over time by each brand and the total brand share considering the whole 6-month period. So we created some simple area charts where you can quickly see the trends and variations, and also added a total percentage share of the 6 months on the right side. What calls my attention first is that the brand C has the highest overall sales, and also there's that big dip in brand D in months 2 and 3. And then by looking at the numbers on the right, you get a sense of the distribution of each brand over the whole period. To summarize what we've seen, good visualizations for business intelligence have the following characteristics. They're simple and provide an efficient interpretation of the visuals, which can help the users to understand what's happening and make decisions quicker. They're clean, with little repetition, enough white space, and a screen that's not cluttered with information. They employ a wise use of each visual element, like chart types, color, and text. And finally, they're very aligned to the business strategy and objective, so everything you display is actually useful. Well, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the content and examples that I brought here today. And feel free to get in touch if you have any questions or want to discuss this topic further.